Welcome to Unbox Your World, the podcast where philosophy meets tech. In each episode, we're connecting the dots between philosophy, technology, society, science, and progressive thought. And together with brilliant minds across the world who dare to challenge the way we think and live in today's society, we are unboxing our minds one episode at a time. I am Muriel Leuenberger. I am a tech professional during the day and a philosopher at night. So let's get started. Let's unbox ourselves. Should you let AI tell you who you are and what you should do? In today's episode, we're interviewing Muriel Leuenberger, who's an ethicist and a postdoctoral researcher in philosophy at the Digital Society Initiative at the University of Zurich. She works on ethics of technology with a focus on generative AI and neuroethics. And in those fields, she analyzes the impact of different technologies on our identity, authenticity, and the meaning in life. In this episode, we dive into her latest research paper called "Should You Let AI Tell You Who You Are and What You Should Do?" We discuss to what extent AI can actually impact who you are and your process of self-creation. Some questions we address are: how do humans form our identity in the first place? How could lack of randomness and bad choices prevent us from finding out who we are? And what could be the implications if we let AI provide recommendations in most aspects of our lives? And where do we draw the line between harmless suggestions and a deeper influence over our identities and our life choices? And lastly, what does the future look like where we get AI right? So tune in to listen to the interview and let's get started. So hello, Muriel Leuenberger. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this topic today. I think it's going to be a great discussion. And then I came across an article that you had written, so that's how I found you. So if we just start off, because you've done a research paper called "Should You Let AI Tell You Who You Are and What You Should Do?" Could you just summarize the key points from your research paper and how you got inspired to explore this topic in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. So I have been working on topics of like identity and authenticity in different contexts before already. Mostly also in neuroethics. So what if I manipulate my brain and then I'm someone else? Am I still authentic? And then I started to see, like in that period, there was more and more information about us available online, or was transformed into digital information, right? So nowadays, a lot about who you are is stored electronically somewhere. So your preferences, or what you bought, or what news you read, and even who you find attractive when you use dating apps. So there's a lot of information about you available digitally. And AI could, in principle, is the idea, know us better than we know ourselves, and might also be better at choosing what we should do, so like who we should vote for, or which job would be suitable for us. And then this was an interesting question for me, because then this raises this idea of like, should I just listen to such an AI, or is that something that we should avoid? And we also know it already from many recommender systems in like smaller scale questions, of course. And in this book chapter, I raised two objections against this idea that we should let AI tell us who we are and what we should do. The first has to do with trust. So should we? It's hard to understand when we should trust such an AI system, especially with questions that are really long term. If I just let it recommend a song on Spotify, I can listen to it and then know pretty quickly if it's good at making this recommendation. But of course, with long time frames, with a suitable job or partner, this would be much more difficult. And especially also since these products develop really quickly, and there's lots of updates. So by the time that you can assess that this recommendation was bad, there are already 10 new versions of these recommenders. So there's a couple of issues with trust, trusting these systems. And then secondly, I say that even if we had a system we could really trust, fundamentally we should create ourselves as well. So the idea is that identity is not just something that we discover. So it is not just like this information that me or an AI can access and like, oh, turns out this is who I am. But we also really choose who we are. This is an idea that goes back mostly to existentialism, that we are continually creating ourselves and that we should do so freely and independently. Of course, we have certain bounds. There are certain boundaries of facts, who we are, where we were born, how tall we are, what we did, what I said to my friend yesterday. But within those boundaries, we can and should create ourselves freely and construct our identity. So there is not like one way, one right way, who I am and what I should do, but I have this individual responsibility to choose who I am. So that's the basic gist of what certain risks are when we let AI tell us who we are and what we should do.
And in your paper, you also emphasize that what you're talking about just now, but that identity is not just something that we discover, but something that we create or choose, as you mentioned. And what you're also talking about is that our mistakes also sort of makes us realize who we are, and randomness in the world. So could you elaborate on this from a philosophical perspective?
Yeah. So the idea is that when you think of the self as something that you just discover, it seems that bad choice is just if you misstep, if you misidentified who you really are. But in a self-creationistic view, if you add this together, I'm not saying there's nothing we discover about ourselves, but in a self-creationistic view, making bad choices also opens up new horizons, like new ways of how you could be or do not want to be. So say if I move to a city and it turns out that was a really bad idea, I'm very unhappy there, I might try to navigate this. I say I might pick up a new hobby because I'm very bored or lonely at this place, and there find new ways of existing in a place where I might not be happy because I made maybe a bad decision. So I think this randomness and bad choices just kind of can broaden our horizon and develop us beyond of who we think we are in the first place. So I think there's value to this as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's when you're going through the mistakes and the rough times in life, you learn the most about who you are.
Yeah, and it's this duality, right? So on the one hand, you learn things in this like discovery mode, but at the same time, this also can open up spaces for creativity and for new modes of action for yourself and new modes of being that you can actively choose in this as a reaction to a bad situation.
Yes, you're saying that it kind of forces you to be more creative, to kind of get out of your own situation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you have to get creative if you're in a bad spot, right? Like as long as you have some space to move still, it forces you to pick up some new modes of being in a way.
Yeah, I resonate with that because actually I wasn't though in a bad space, but I decided to halfway through university, I decided to take a gap and move to Sydney, where I didn't have a job, I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a place to stay, and I just had to be, and I didn't have much savings either. So and then I just noticed that's exactly what happened. I had to be so creative. And it just opened up new ways of being entrepreneurial. So I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, I think like difficult situations are often situations where we cannot just continue to be who we were because it doesn't seem to be working, right? If you are in difficult situations. So you have to develop and go new routes.
Yeah. Yeah, and what would be the implications if we let AI provide recommendations in most aspects of our lives? I mean, we have had it for Netflix and music and so on, but uh, one thing is what happens on a day-to-day basis in our lives, but also what would be the implication from a human evolution perspective if we let AI provide more and more recommendations in all of our lives.
Yeah, that is of course always a difficult question to visit like long-term big predictions, but I can give some ideas. So I think if we let AI just to start like from a more individual level and then maybe go into a broader human perspective. So if we let AI decide or like help us decide a lot for a lot of our choices in our lives, there's a couple of risks. Like first of all, that we might follow interests of whoever provides this AI service, so maybe for a company or a government, and hopefully those could be designed in a way that is aligning with our interests, but of course not necessarily. So say YouTube recommendations are notorious for recommending videos that lead people to, say, believe in conspiracy theories or get politically radicalized. And these are not really serving our interests, but they're serving, of course, the company's interests in keeping us engaged and keeping us stuck to the screen and to these applications. So there's a big risk that because these providers are not designed by the individual themselves, and there are always other interests that are guiding these processes as well, usually. And that just might create a tension and come apart. Similarly with government services, there might be different interests leading such recommenders. And on a further level, there might also be less understanding for choices. So if I really deliberate what I'm doing, why I'm doing something, I can also better understand my choices and ascribe meaning to them. So the idea is that the things I do in my life and the way they also become part of my identity is not just like the hard facts, okay, I'm someone who's doing this job, but also kind of what they mean for me. So part of my identity is ascribe meaning to things. Well, I'm doing this job means this for me. Here I can express this part of my identity. I can be really empathetic in this job or very creative, or this job just means security for me. And if we leave choices to AI and deliberate less, we might have less of an understanding of what things mean for us and of what we can do in those say in those jobs, what opportunities it allows us to achieve there. And in a similar vein, so in AI ethics, there's a lot of talk about de-skilling. So if we let AI take over, we lose certain skills because AI does them for us. So, and then similar, this could also happen in terms of personal decision making. And it means ultimately, if you really let AI take over to a large extent, it means that you are no longer responsible for who you are. And in a sense, it's also no longer your achievement. Like at some point, you're just like a puppet going through the movements of the AI, or like an actor in a movie. It's not their achievement if the hero in the movie saved the world. Similarly, if I just do what the AI tells me to do, like I'm still involved, so it's not like I'm not fully detached from it, but it's still different when I make those choices. So there's still more responsibility and also more praise and blame that we can ascribe to people. Yeah, and like this, we already touched upon that these recommender systems are inherently conservative, so it might kind of calcify identities, and you just like stay in the lane that the recommenders identified for who you are. Yeah, and I think like more generally on bigger scales, if we have this across the board, we already see this a bit in like political realms, but this could spread if we use fine-grained recommenders everywhere. That such highly personalized recommender could lead to less understanding for people who act differently, because if you don't really have to consider different options and weigh different views, then you might also understand less why someone else might pick something different. So there might be less understanding for each other if you just stay within your kind of decision lane, decision bubble, and don't really consider the options that are in leading a life. So I think this is also something in a broader sense that could lead to societal shifts that would not be preferable. But of course, I mean, there's the positive side. Like we don't just have to stick to the negatives. Like people might just make better decisions. People might be more successful in some ways. They might not run into problems that they are doing when they are bad decision makers. So it's not all black, but I think there would be some serious issues to consider if we had these like broad scale AI recommenders.
Yeah, I mean that's also what I had in mind, thinking like would this stagnate people's personal development? Because a lot of personal development is also to understand and embrace other perspectives. So that was also what I was thinking about potentially, that could happen, that there would be less perspective embracement from different points of views, and with that, this is actually an area that I've been thinking about a lot for the past years, but about hyper personalization. This is pretty much what you are talking about, but when everything is just getting hyper personalized, even if it's just so not just the Spotify and Netflix, but also the smart fridge, and like the ads that we see might have a certain accent that we like, and then everything is just getting enhanced, and it's not it's not necessarily bad either, but it's just being enhanced to what we like. And do you think that we in the future because if you compare to journalism, then the idea of a magazine is they have an editor that is supposed to have, and nothing is perfect, and even humans are also biased, but at least according to high ethical journalistic standards, they are supposed to bring in a balanced view of different perspectives. At least that is the goal of the editor, to do that when they're doing magazines. Do you think we would need editors in the future for AI systems and products and so on, to just bring in that bit of randomness into our products and feeds and recommendations and smart fridges and whatnot, to kind of get exposed to that randomness that we otherwise wouldn't get?
Yeah, I think so. The question is how we imagine those super AI recommenders to be, right? So if exposure to diverse viewpoints, for example, would contribute to well-being, and we have this ideal version of a recommender, then this might just be part of it. It might just be part of the system. But of course, what we see now in recommenders is more this narrowing down of options. So I think based on what we see, the concern is definitely valid, and the idea that we should try to avoid this by something like maybe an editor for recommenders. And I think there are already to some degree, what I'm aware of, that many recommenders already have some randomness or some diverging in it, because it apparently slightly increases user engagement as well. It makes it a little bit more interesting. But it could definitely be broader. And I think there are areas, as you mentioned, with news, where it is particularly important, because we have to make political decisions about the world kind of together. It's important that we share some common ground. And we see already the high costs if everyone lives in their own news bubble and is getting radicalized and cannot talk, groups stop talking to each other. I think there is a really high risk in this. In other areas, it seems a bit less risky, if people have their music style and are just going down that lane and never really listen to the other music styles. There's not much, I think that there's not that much moral risk behind it as with news. And I think it's also not to neglect that while these recommenders might stifle a bit the broadness of our tastes, they can give a lot of depth to them. So if a recommender system picks up that you really like this one music genre, for example, you can get exposed to so much music and nuance within that one genre that would be really difficult to find without such help. And we also have to be aware that in many areas, say in especially music, but also other video content, there's just so much that it's really hard to handle without any recommenders. Sorry. It's really hard to make decisions in this flood of options. So I think there are some positive upshots to have these really personalized ones as well. But especially in certain areas, it can get really risky. And I think anything that is connected with more social interaction and political choices, I think this is where it would be important to have a bit more broadness brought into. But of course, also in music, we can profit from maybe broadening our horizon. But it's less risky if we are, morally speaking, if we are not very broad music listeners, I guess.
Yeah. So where do you draw the line between harmless or positive recommendations to having a deeper influence over identity and life choices?
Yeah, that is really difficult, I think. To just really draw a line and say, okay, here is up to here, it's okay. And we definitely shouldn't think that every recommendation is bad. But I think one thing that's important is that we can also engage differently with recommendations. So I can't just defer to AI and just say, okay, I'm just doing whatever it says. I'm not even thinking about it. Also, in small areas, I can just listen to the Spotify recommendations without even considering whether I like this song or whether I would like to skip it. Or the other option is to kind of stay present, to reflect in light of the recommendation, to reflect whether this choice is really good, what could be the reasons for this choice. Hopefully, if we would have an AI that would recommend more further reaching decisions, it would also give reasons for this, and then we could reflect on the reasons and still keep some of the decision making for us. So we can still say, yeah, it recommended these things, but I can also follow the reasons for this recommendation. I can see why it would be helpful and good for me to do this, and this is why I'm doing it. So I think generally, if you stay engaged, it is much more benign. But of course, the more far-reaching decisions are, the more risky I think it is in those terms of identity that we mentioned before, that you should keep responsibility for who you are, you should make choices about who you are, and the more meaningful a choice is for your identity, the more important it is also that you take it yourself, I think. So just deferring a partner choice to an AI and just blindly following that would seem a bit crazy to me, honestly.
Yeah, and something that just hit me though is these days that we are suffering with this amazing information overload. I'm just wondering how much difference it is to compare to when we didn't have all this information, where maybe you were only faced with like, okay, here are 3 educational options you can do, and here's the but 20 years ago when I was young, like you listened to those top artists that were just released, and you kept on listening to the same single that you bought over and over and over again. So I'm wondering what the big difference is. But there's probably somewhere there in between that is the healthy balance.
Yeah. I mean, we have to keep in mind that we shouldn't compare it with like an ideal choice scenario where we can assess. We have access to all the options. We can assess them. We can understand them. We can understand consequences. This is not how the world is. How it never was. So, say in the music business, of course, there was a lot of power with the radio stations and the big labels who could decide to a large degree what we listen to as well. And in a sense, these recommenders also give some power by making this huge amount of options manageable for us, and by letting us navigate this big space that we weren't even aware before, maybe. So I don't want to say that necessarily living without it is in all ways better. And it's better than it used to be, for example, in terms of these like identity questions and then responsibility for choosing yourself. But I think one crucial difference is that we have this mode available of just handing over choices to a system in a way that is very comfortable for us. Like, of course, before people were also like just listening to the radio and whatever the radio played, or just watching those 2-3 TV channels that were available, or whatever. But there, it still creates some discomfort because there's still things playing on the radio that you don't like, or shows that you don't like, or news that you don't agree with. And this keeps us engaged in deliberating what our position is, whether we like this. And now when we have these recommendations that are just like streamlined to what we already like and what we're already comfortable with, we can disengage. It's much easier to just turn off this decision maker inside of us and just kind of go with the flow and be less engaged. So I think this is a particular risk with this recommender system, like the comfort that they give us, that we're not challenged, we just stay in that, and we don't really have to, that was like what we touched upon before, we don't have to go beyond and be creative and decide and make choices about who we are. We can just like stay in that little lane that the AI cut out for us.
Yeah. And in your own view, then, to wrap things up, how does the future look like if we get this right?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that would be necessary. So I think on the one hand, from the technology side, I think we would need some regulation to make sure that AI aligns with our value and not just like company interests or whatever else, whatever other interests that emerges from these AI systems. Sometimes it's even hard to understand from the provider side. So I think, especially looking at these like largely unregulated social media, that already has so like broad and far-reaching negative effects. Like we should try to not copy this and really think about how we want those technologies to shape us and our society, and more specifically to recommenders. So I think it would be good to we could also think of recommenders as in a more interesting way. I think in a more creative way. So we could have recommenders that provide interesting personal recommendations, but also maybe a more generalized perspective. Of course, yeah, like especially we touched upon this like in certain area, but also in music. It's a bit a silly example, but how does Spotify not have a random song selector? That would be so cool, and it would also be a way to broaden our views a bit, or an option to choose music that has some similarities to a song you like, but from a completely different genre. So I think we could use recommenders a bit more playfully, that integrate some parts of your like personal preferences with other a bit more radically broadening views. Yeah, and I think lastly, most important, I think, is AI and technology literacy. So people should understand what the system do and how they negatively or positively impact them. And yeah, we need to learn how to use this technology wisely. Like now it's just being implemented quite quickly, and people are using them very quickly without us having much idea of what it's doing with us, how it's like broad scaling, impacting us on a broad scale. And I think this is particularly important at a young age, because now already like children and teenagers are using technologies very broadly, and especially in context with identity. Like those are the ones who do not have a fully developed identity yet, right? So like kids and teenagers, they of course they have some characteristics, but many things are open, are not clear yet. They have to grow into and develop an identity. And there, I think these technologies are particularly risky, and we should be very mindful of how it affects people at this young age. Yeah, so this is more about like strategies, how to cope with probably a better future of AI. But one, like ideally, really like a positive scenario would be one where it can give us helpful advice that we can also understand and follow, and where we keep engaged, where maybe an AI that not just gives a recommendation, but gives like reasons, or look at this and that, and like also gives us recommendations based on our social and personal well-being, which includes broader viewpoints and other considerations. Yeah, so like very generally speaking, I think there are some also like definitely positive potential of AI in the future that we could hopefully realize.
I was watching a documentary about cybersecurity and how they were referring to like things that happen online so fast. It's like people are driving without a driver's license. So maybe, so they were saying that we need a driver's license in cybersecurity. Maybe we need a driver's license in AI too.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. It's really, I think we are not used to technology developing so fast. It really picked up speed so much in the last like 2 decades, and now we're just a couple steps behind. Like now countries say, okay, we ban social media for teenagers because we've seen it's actually like a huge risk, but it's always after the fact, after we've seen a lot of negative effects, then we understand and we start to regulate. So yeah, it's a bit the other way around. Like say with the airplane, there was so many fears, and from the beginning there was a lot of regulation, which also helped people trust more in those systems. So people always talk of regulation as this like negative and innovation stifling, but there's also a great potential of regulation for innovation to build trust and innovate in a useful direction instead of going the wrong way and then backtracking and going another way.
Yeah.
So and then getting something like a driver license, could also be a way of, on the one hand, educating people, but then maybe also getting input from people to the developers, how they are dealing with this technology and where struggles are. And it's good to keep it a two-way road as well.
So just to wrap it up, just what are your top tips then for people to think
Top
about?
tips.
Yeah, do you have any?
So I think one is to stay engaged a bit, like in your decision making. I think it's easier to shut off and just let recommendations take over, but try to stay engaged. At least sometimes, maybe when you're super tired and come home and you just want to turn off, you don't have to. But and other times, it would be good to be involved in the decisions of what you do and listen and make, and also like to stay curious and be open in a broader sense. I think much. I don't have any more concrete tips beyond that.
Thank you so much for joining, and keep up this good work that you are doing, and sharing perspectives on this, which is an important topic for the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was a nice conversation. Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. And if you want to read up more about the guest, then you can go to the show notes to get all of the links. And also, if you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter to never miss the latest episode. Thank you for today. See you in the next episode.